Okay, so um, in this video, I'm joined by a friend of mine, uh, and he and I are going to be talking. The gameplay in the background is just it's there for something for your eyes, and so that it's not just me talking to a blank picture for the whole video. But I had a few topics I wanted to talk about potentially. You can pick out the topic you like more. Um, so yeah, how would you like to be addressed for this,
Kris is fine.
Kris? Okay, I just want to make sure. I always check with people.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
already
so
did this last time.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Um, so the first topic is, you know what a mix-up is in fighting games?
Uh, no.
A mix-up refers to a situation where you have to pick like one of like several possible like things that could be coming, and if you pick wrong, you're going to be punished for it in some way. But you can't know what your opponent's going to throw at you until you've already decided.
So it's like rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, exactly. Rock, paper, scissors is a kind of mix-up. Although you in a mix-up scenario, it's like only you can have a bad outcome.
Hmm.
So it's like in rock, paper, scissors, your opponent could win or lose depending on the outcome, but it's like in a mix-up, it's like you get hit or you don't get hit.
So it's like 50-50 rock, paper, scissors with your opponent choosing one
Well, the thing about mixed up is that
option.
they don't actually have only 50-50. There can be multiple things you could be having to choose against. So, like, complex mix-ups are like the most powerful ones, and that's to say, when you have to make your opponent choose between, say, three or more things that they could be faced with, and if they don't react to properly, they'll be punished. Like some things, some attacks require you to like respond really quickly. Some of them require you to use certain kind of blocks or to do certain
Hmm.
kind of parries. And if
Okay.
you try to not do these like right answers, you're gonna get punished for it.
In league terms, we could
So
say it like Yasuo Windwall usage.
kinda, but it's more like in league terms, like expecting your opponent to like, are they gonna like back or are they trying to freeze the wave? Like, are they faking a base or not?
Hmm.
And if you don't react like appropriately to them doing that, like you're gonna get punished because they then would, your wave state gets fucked up. Another example of a league mix-up
Yeah.
is like if you think your opponent's gonna throw a skill shot a certain direction and they don't like, and you're trying to get minds games with them. Like Blitzcrank, if you don't know if Blitz is gonna like try and hold the hook, like lead with it, or how he's going to respond. And if you don't react properly to this, you can get killed for it. Like
Right.
at least that's a partial example of like how mix-ups work in League at least. This is a term that I realized I think it's underexplored for League of Legends. Like we don't often think about like how sometimes, if you don't take the right course of action, you're not going to be able to like no, actually, sorry, I remember what it was. It's sometimes people think that they can always pick the right choice. Like players will sometimes think that they can always choose the right answer, but you can't. Sometimes what the whole thing about
Well,
mix-ups is that and let's actually go get to the core of it. A mix-up is something that you can't know what the right answer is until you've already made a choice. You can
yeah,
look at your
since you
opponent's
don't.
patterns, you can see what they've been looking like they've been doing and see what you think they'll do, but you can't know. And what I think good players do though is they reduce the number of situations where they can have themselves put into a mix-up by their opponent. Like you don't want to give your opponent a bunch of opportunities to do this to you. Another
Well,
similar a similar example is like
that
when you and your opponent both have like, it's like a late game fight and you're like trying to dance with each other and space each other. If you don't have flash and your opponent does, they can suddenly break the spacing and like punish you.
Mhm.
And that's an example of like putting yourself in dangerous scenarios like you don't have flash, they do. That's a risky scenario that if you're a good player, you wouldn't want to be in if you actually expect them to have flash. Because then you're risking your life by playing the spacing game. And you suddenly dying can result in big blowouts if there's no one else in the area to respond. But that's a example of what I think it's just to like make it so people realize that you cannot play perfectly and to realize that League of Legends is a game about mistakes. Like you're gonna make them at some point because the information is imperfect and because it's a large game where you undergo a lot of stress as you play, and dealing with that
What I would
stress.
like to add to this, in terms of mix-up, if you put yourself into the shoes of your enemy, like what they would like to do in the situation, you don't really have all the information that they do. So
Well,
it makes the situation a bit easier to think what can be the outcome of what you're trying to do. But
I mean to say, like,
mm,
when I say like put yourself in their shoes, is like when I or profile like their mental, it's like if I see someone going for the same cheese over and over, I'm gonna expect them to do it again. But
I meant it more in
I'm not saying that
I
that's
meant it
their
more in
only
a
choice.
way, yeah, but I meant it more in a way of uh in a broader situation like map plays.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
even then
you don't
there's
know, you don't have the information that they do about your minimap, but you see like some of the possible outcomes
well, here's
that
the
could
thing.
be happening.
I will I say one thing on that regard. While this is true partially, there's a lot of things in League of Legends that restrict like what you can do. Waves and neutrals are usually the big ones. Like, yes, you might not have perfect knowledge, but if you see it, there's a wave building bot lane and that someone's going to need to come clear it, and you see the other enemy locations, then if there's one enemy missing, you're really sure he's heading there. Because if he's not, then no one's heading there, and that's a problem for the enemy team. That's why it's very predictable why you can like see where someone's going to need to go.
Mm.
Assassin players use this a lot, I think, actually.
Well, yes, but at the same time, you don't have the information that the enemy do.
Yes, but people have
And
to
if
show on the map for waves. And that's like the thing is in League of Legends you get forced to show. And then there's a matter of like how fast can you even move from that location you last were seen at. Like while you can't see the enemy, you can invisibly interpret where they are based on the information you've had available. Like you just
that
read
is true.
you read between the lines. And it's like League of Legends is actually quite restrictive what you can do. Like if you're a jungler, if all your camps are down on one side, you're not going to go to that side of the map most likely. It's like very
You,
bad
you
if you
have
do.
you have only so many options at a certain time.
Exactly. And that's why the mix up is can your opponent properly guess which one you're going to do? And if they do guess right, do they respond in a way that punishes you? Like invades from junglers are huge on this regard. Like especially junglers that look to kill the enemy jungler. Like those champions are looking to get a read on you, and then if you don't respond correctly to them, you die.
Hmm.
And that's a great mix-up example. Like I think the term mix-up makes it sound like is like confusion. It's more just like it's a change of like what your opponent might be expecting. Because a good example in fighting games is like if you're getting up off the ground, your opponent can grab you and then like it throws you, and like the big thing about grabs is they go through like block. So if you get off of the ground and you try and block thinking your opponent's going to just hit you with a regular attack, if they were to grab you instead, you would get thrown and you'd still get hit basically. So every time try and get off the ground, you have to now guess, is my opponent going to grab me or are they going to hit me?
Hmm.
So a mix up is like you've grabbed them 3 times and they think you're going to grab them again and you now punch them. So it's like you can go for like a move that like, will catch them off guard from what they're expecting.
In reference to this, I was watching BBC not too long ago,
Hmm.
and they were talking about how like good players mix up their movement
Hmm. Yeah.
so they get hit less frequently, and also so they can force certain movement
Yep.
from their
That's
opponent.
baiting and feigning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in that regard, a lot of that comes down to like when you're in a scenario where League of Legends is interesting because like the example I gave of getting off the ground in fighting games, that's a scenario where you can't choose to not play. Like in League of Legends, you can give up a CS. You don't have to go for a certain CS. You could let, the wave state be bad temporarily, but like that's a situation that doesn't occur in fighting games in a way.
I mean, the concepts are just different, so yeah.
Well, yeah, they are slightly different, and more it's like in League of Legends, that is actually a type of mix-up. Is like, do you give up that CS instead of trying to go for it? Like that's the proper response in some scenarios. Like knowing that there's possibly an ambush coming or the jungler is going to be like lurking, giving up that CS is the right choice.
Hmm. But you can't choose to not play in
Yeah, that's
fighting
true.
games.
Like fighting games, you get put in scenarios where you don't have a choice. You have to respond right now. And League of Legends has that sometimes too. It's like if you get put in a scenario where when your enemies are now like TPing to your lane, like when you're in the middle of a fight, like you have to respond to how are you going to deal with this right now.
Well, I mean, in fighting games, your choices are a bit more limited than in League. So
They are,
basically,
yeah.
that could you could say the League is a bit harder on this front.
Oh yeah, League is I don't know if I'd call it harder, but it's more complex because like you're not restricted to a singular like platform or like arena. Like League's arena is very large unless you're against like Mordekaiser.
Or the newly added champion, Aura
Kind of,
or
but you
Aurora.
can use blinks through her shit and everything.
Sure, but not
She's
every
got like
champion
a
has
weird
blinks.
budget Camille ulti. I mean, that's what I'm gonna call it. She's got budget Camille ult.
In a way.
I mean, it's a zone that you're not supposed to be able to leave, but this one you can flash out of. It's
Sure, but Camel ult is only for one person. This works for more.
true. That is true. It's a I shouldn't call it budget because that implies it's a worse version of Camille ulti, but it's like it is a rendition of a Camille ulti that is interesting. Like it's the same principle as Camille ulti. It's a lockdown tool that is like prevents the targets from leaving.
Yes.
It's kind of like Jarvan ulti was the original.
It's a cross between Javan and Camille ulti.
I mean, it's closer to Mordekaiser ulti than Jarvan's. Jarvan ulti is like specifically the fact that it's a arena you can like lock someone in that counts as terrain and that you can leave if you want to. Camille and Aurora cannot leave their ultis.
Aurora can leave her ulti now.
It ends if she leaves it.
No, no, no. She can leave it.
She touches the
But
wall
she.
and she'll teleport to the other side. If she leaves
Oh,
the
so that's
area
how the
before it
teleport
forms,
works.
yeah, if she leaves it before it forms, it fully ends. It doesn't even spawn.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. She just has to stay in it
I mean, Camille can walk out of hers.
before.
No, like once it forms, if she touches the edge, it will like then teleport to the other side. If she leaves it before
Hmm.
it forms, it will not even form at all. Like that's what
Yes.
I've seen. So that's like me saying like, Camille can use her R and then walk out of it. Yeah, but it ends.
Does Camille's R deal damage?
Well, yes, technically.
I
Every
mean,
time she,
to the target.
every time she attacks them, it does damage.
Well, okay, but when she ults the
She
target, it doesn't deal damage to the target, only to the surrounding champions, no?
no, I mean, are you talking about Aurora or Camille?
Camille.
Camille ulti on cast makes her untargetable, jumps on the target, knocks away all enemies except for the target, and then
Yes, and the
against the
enemies take
target,
damage.
no,
They're knocked out.
no, it does no damage to anyone except the target you ulted takes percentage current HP damage on each auto attack.
Oh. Okay, then I had just a bit different understanding of the ult.
That's fine. It also disrupts, so it'll break any channels when you cast it. Useful versus things like Fiddlesticks or Vladimir. I mean, not Vladimir. Well, it works against Vladimir too, actually, but it's good against Victor, is what I was gonna. Not Victor, Anivia, or
Nivea.
you break
I've
her R.
seen quite a lot of Nivea top lane now.
I mean, I haven't seen much of it, but I know it is a thing. But back to the point I was trying to say, because I wanted to keep this semi-focused. It's funny, we talked all these things about mix-ups, and I guess at this point I should just make that the discussion point because I was gonna have some other topics. I was just trying to present you with like a option range, and we've kind of begun a discussion about it. So we're gonna keep on that for now.
Yeah, we can stay on that one.
Okay, so I think it's gonna run for about another 10 minutes because I'm gonna let the game finish. But my reason I like got so into mix-ups and like why I think that's an interesting topic is that it comes down to players being perfectionistic, like, and not wanting to make any mistakes at all. Or if they make any mistakes, they like get really upset with themselves or like they're like frustrated with their gameplay.
It's just inherently impossible, though.
Exactly, and that's why it's a doomed recipe if you have that kind of belief style. And it's like I was trying to find a way that I can actually like communicate this to other people because it's like how do you tell someone that the way they're looking at the game is actually inherently just set up to fail? So it's like I was trying to find a way to do it elegantly without just saying, "Hey, it's a you problem." I'm trying to say that League of Legends is a game where you can't always make the right choice.
But do you think that people will listen?
I think if I can find a way to like not like through this video specifically, but maybe this is a good like intro point for like once people actually are open to the topic. Mix-ups are because you can't know what choice your opponent will choose. Like a good example is actually let's go with Blitzcrank, okay?
Hmm.
I played Sivir for a long time, right? And Sivir versus
Yeah.
Blitzcrank is a really special matchup because a lot of Blitzcrank players I see, they might throw Qs, like, they might do them from bushes. They might try and, like hide them behind when a minion's gonna die. They might just go for them as is, or they'll try and run up with W and do them. But if they're against a player on Sivir who's really good at their spell shields, they're gonna find that no matter what they try and do as far as, their Q goes, unless they, yeah, no, if they try and fire Q and the Sivir is not like standing by a bush that it has like blitz in it, they'll never land it. Like it just won't land ever.
Mm.
And so what happens is Blitzcrank players they either give up and like then they just never throw Q again, and that's usually a win scenario for Sivir. Or the good ones, I believe, they get creative. They try and run up an E Sivir first, and then if she blocks it, they'll go for the Q. The trouble there is that Sivir can actually still sidestep that because she's blocked the E, and now if she sidesteps fast enough, she'll be able to get out of the way of the Q. So another layer on top of that is the Blitzcrank players will R then E. So the Sivir can't
Mm.
even spell shield it. This is doable, although the trouble is that the Sivir, if she's got her passive speed and her ultimate, sometimes the Blitzcrank can't get in range to use their R. I mean use the E auto. Now the final layer is the Blitzcrank player can use Flash R E Q. So this is like there's no counterplay. I call it the no counterplay combo, if done properly. It prevents Sivir from having any ability to react. Now, most Blitzcrank players don't do this because one, it's more intensive and it's more work than normally
You
needed.
also need the flash for it.
Yeah, you need flash, you need to have like all your tools available, and it's like normally that's just like it's not necessary a lot of times. Like against any other champion, it's not really that necessary to do this. Because if you're doing
Hmm.
it right, you need to like R flash. Like you use the R and then you flash during the cast time of it. But
Hmm.
because the silence on R is very short. But yeah, this is
Right.
a
If she shields the R,
well, no, it's like if you are and then you don't like immediately knock her up, since the silence is so short, she could potentially get her spell shut up in time.
so basically you also need to know the exact range.
Well, R is huge, but you have to know how far you can E from. Like the R
Yeah,
is a
like
big
not
area.
R, but the E.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you have to know your auto range basically. You have to flash into your auto attack range.
But your E gives you 50 more range as every ability that gives you.
Well, not every
Uh,
ability gives 50, but yes, it gives you additional range. Some abilities give 25, some give 75. Like a good example is Camille Q gives you I think 75. Wukong Q gives 175. Aatrox is 50.
Oh, but
Shen is
those are
75.
Wukong Q. I would argue that isn't in the same category.
Well, it's like a Kali passive. It's an empowered auto attack.
Yes,
It's
it is, but
it's
it
actually
is
it's an
a bit
uncancelable windup.
different.
Well, I mean to say actually, if you like on the wiki, especially this is a category. We call these empowered basic attacks that have uncancelable windups, like Camille Q, Darius W, Garen Q. Wukong Q, what's different about it is it has additional range over all the others.
There is W is cancelable though.
Mm, no,
It is.
it's an uncancelable attack. We call that uncancelable because once the windup starts, it cannot be avoided. Like I'm going to say, you know how Darius can go like WQ?
Yeah, WQ. You
Uncancelable
cancel
doesn't mean
the,
that the attack will fail. It means that it cannot be
or
stopped. As in,
the
like,
animation
yes, it's
doesn't
about
count.
animations. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Uncancelable means the attack. Camille's Q is uncancelable, which would seem weird because she can go QW, but that's why it's uncancelable. That just means the attack will not cancel. It will still go off even though the animation is overwritten.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about that. That's actually a term that might not make sense initially. Because yeah, it sounds like you're saying that you cannot cancel it as in you can't do anything else, right?
Yeah, like
It sounds like you're saying it sounds like I'm saying you must do this attack fully and you can't do anything else until it's done, but that's not what I mean.
basically that's how I understood it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a interesting distinction to clear up. But back on the topic of mix-ups and Sivir Blitzcrank is that matchup. If you're against a player and like you and the Blitzcrank, he's identified like you're gonna block every single Q, and you're identifying the fact that he's actually getting creative and he's looking for alternative ways to hit a hook on you. Like he's hiding in
Mm-hmm.
bushes, using his flash things on you. When you're in that scenario, now you're gonna have to react to each other. So whenever you're like in a moment of like a standstill, you haven't E'd and he hasn't Q'd or done anything yet. You don't know how the other person is gonna play out that specific instance, and you need to be prepared for it because if you don't respawn correctly, you're going to die. And you have no way of knowing which one he's gonna do.
So basically, what you're trying to say by that is,
So yeah, actually, what I said earlier about how good players don't put themselves in these scenarios if they can help it is that when I'm against that Blitzcrank player who I realize has identified this like how he needs to play, I avoid taking unnecessary scenarios with him. Like if I don't have a wave to clear or some reason to be in range of him where he can threaten me with this, I do not stand near him.
hmm
Whereas versus a player who's not doing this like kind of like behavior where he's actually just going for those bad cues repeatedly, I'm fine standing
you
in range.
challenge him.
Yeah, I challenge him because I'm like he has not shown me any sign why I should be worried about him. But a player who's clearly on the same page, I'm not gonna fuck around and be near him because I'm just leaving myself vulnerable to an open to taking an opening on me.
hmm
But yeah, that's a good explanation of like how mix-ups apply in League, I think. Is if your opponent is showing awareness of like what they can do. Yeah, it's actually is does your opponent know what they can do in the matchup?
It's a good question.
Like if
It
your
comes to
opponent is aware of
matchup
what they're
understanding.
capable of, it changes how the matchups play entirely.
Yeah, this is why you basically have to get creative at high ranks.
Yes,
This is how
exactly.
you
That's
distinguish good people from the bad ones.
I think high ranks
No, like
players especially are very big on like, having to make creative plays to deal with scenarios that might be seen on paper as unwinnable. Or it's like
yes,
they're
or
not they're
also
not winnable through just direct confrontation or standard means. You have to take alternative methods, otherwise it's not going to work.
hmm?
I saw
Especially if both the players know the matchup.
yeah, exactly true. That's the other thing is if both players are aware of what the matchup plays out like normally. But that's where your ability to be creative really really comes in. And that's actually like a lot of times like I was kind of cooking with Shen earlier. Like I've played a lot of Shen and I've been having a lot of success with Shen. but I was doing like some interesting builds. Like I went like Symbiotic Souls into Warmogs with Titanic Hydra Sunfire, like just, and it was like a 1v9 build. I was just like going everywhere on the map because you get the movement speed out of combat from Warmogs and from Symbiotic Souls. So I could be
Hmm.
ulting around the map and going back to lane. Titanic Hydra plus Sunfire gives you all this wave clear.
That sounds funny.
Yeah, it was. But that's an example of like me getting really creative because in that game I had to deal with a Quinn, and like she was really hard to match and as well. Otherwise,
Hmm.
but anyways, so the video just ended, so I'm gonna close out here. But thanks for taking the time to talk on this. Like I think this was a good intro on this topic. Cause is there anything you want to close off with, like for just
Uh,
talking about mix-ups?
I would just say that think about your opponent's options and your options at the same time.
Hmm.
That will elevate your ability to make plays.
Yeah, it's like just to deal with scenarios and like this is the mental game of League, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, all right, Chris. Thanks for talking.
Yeah.